Today's topic is on net zero emission. So more countries are committing to net zero emission by 2050. The coalition is growing. Obviously, the coalition is growing, but commitments must be backed by bold, credible actions by every country in the world. Starting now, net zero is possible. Starting now. For livable climate, net zero commitments must be backed by credible actions. What is net zero? As the name implies, just put it very simple. Net zero means cutting carbon emissions to a small amount of residual emissions that can be absorbed and durably stored by nature and other carbon dioxide removal measures, leaving zero in the atmosphere. What is net zero? Why is net zero important? That's a simple question. Why is net zero important? The science shows clearly that in order to avert the worst impacts of climate change and preserve a livable planet, global temperature increase needs to be limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level. Currently, the Earth is already above 1.2 degrees Celsius, warmer than it was in the late 18th centuries. And emission continues to rise. To keep global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, called for in the Paris Agreement, as I said earlier, to keep global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, as called for in the Paris Agreement, emission needs to be reduced by 45%. Emission need to be reduced. Obviously, emission need to be reduced by 45% globally by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. That's just the Paris Agreement. We have to keep the Paris Agreement and work towards the actualization of this. How do we remove carbon from the atmosphere? How do we achieve residual carbon in the atmosphere? In fact, to net zero. No, simple. Every individual needs to plant. In addition to the natural plants we have within our environment, we need to plant more. We need to plant because the simple biology that the green plant use carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. So when green plants are using the carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, you are eliminating carbon from the atmosphere. It's not a rocket science. It's a very simple thing we do on a daily basis. Let every member of every family plant one green plant. One plant as a way of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And the industries, the giant companies in the oil industries, need to adopt what we call decarbonization. Aramco is doing decarbonization, have launched decarbonization over the years. So other companies need to adopt decarbonization to ensure that carbon is being removed from the atmosphere and properly stored for other commercial uses. So we look at why is net zero important. The science shows clearly that in order to avert the worst impact of climate change and preserve a livable planet, global temperature increase needs to be limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level. Currently, the Earth is already about 1.2 degrees Celsius warmer than it was in the late 18th centuries, as I've earlier said. So, when we discuss about why and how can we, achieve this, we talk about transitioning to a net zero world is one of the greatest challenges humankind has faced. It called for nothing less than a complete transformation of how we produce, consume, and how we move about. The energy sector is the source of around 3/4 of greenhouse gas emissions today and holds the key to averting the worst effects of climate change, replacing polluting coals, gas, and oil-fired power with energy from renewable sources such as wind and solar would dramatically reduce carbon emissions. You see, we have to stick to Paris Agreement to ensure that we achieve the predetermined overall global objective. Thank you. Okay, with climate change, we're still on net zero emission. Is there a global effort to reach net zero 2050? Yes. I say yes. A growing coalition of countries, cities, businesses, and other institutions are pledging to get to net zero emissions. As of June 2024, 107 countries responsible for approximately 82% of global greenhouse gas emissions had adopted net zero pledges either in law, in a policy document such as a national climate action plan or a long-term strategy, or in announcement by a high-level government official. More than 9,000 companies, over 1,000 cities, more than 1,000 educational institutions, and over 600 financial institutions have joined the Race to Zero pledge to take rigorous, immediate actions to halve global emissions by 2030. How do we ensure commitments are turned into action? How? The growth in net zero pledges has been accompanied by a proliferation of criteria with varying levels of robustness to develop stronger and clearer standards for net zero emissions pledges by non-state entities such as businesses, investors, cities, and regions, and steps up their implementations. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in March 2022 established a high-level expert group on the net zero emission commitments of the non-state entities. The expert group presented its recommendations at COP27 on 8 November 2022. Are we on track to reach net zero by 2050? No. Commitment made by governments to date falls far short of what is required. Current national climate plans for about 195 parties to the Paris Agreement taken together would lead to a 2.6% decrease in global greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 compared to 2019 levels. To keep global warming to none more than 1.5 degrees Celsius as called by in the Paris Agreement, emissions need to be reduced by 43% by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050, getting to net zero require all government first and foremost the biggest emitters to significantly strengthen their national determined contributions and take bold immediate steps towards reducing their emissions. Thank you.